Hi, I'm Jack from Positive Earth and I'm here today to talk about foraging. Spring has arrived, the birds are singing, the woodlands and hedgerows are coming to life, and it's a great time of year to start learning about wild foods. The new shoots and leaves that are starting to emerge at the moment are packed full of nutrients, and many are tender enough to eat raw at this stage. In this video, I will introduce you to some of the most common and easy to identify species that are either in season now or will start appearing over the coming months. Before we take a look at some plants in more detail, you might be thinking, why would you want to forage in the first place? I mean, when the supermarkets have got so much choice and they bring us foods from all around the world, what is the benefit to going out and looking for wild foods? Well, firstly, there's the nutritional benefits. Researchers confirm that wild foods are more densely packed with nutrients, particularly things like vitamins A, vitamin C, antioxidants, all of which are really good for the immune system. Some wild foods can lower your cholesterol, while others reduce your blood pressure. They can also help with inflammation in the body. So there are many health reasons to incorporate some of these foods into your diet. Secondly, it's good exercise. You generally have to walk some distance to be able to find these plants. They're not just waiting around on your doorstep, and any time spent outdoors is really good for your health. More importantly, in my opinion, foraging is a really mindful activity. You have to be able to pay attention to your surroundings in order to find wild foods. Take the time to notice the plants around you. If you're walking through the woods mindlessly or just chatting away with your friends, you're likely going to miss many potential foraging finds. So you really have to be aware of what's around you, be patient, and give yourself lots of time to search and stay focused on what you're doing. That in itself is a really good mental exercise, and it's relaxing too. In addition to the many health benefits of using wild foods, I also think that learning about nature in general helps us to appreciate just how wonderful it is. Our ancestors had an intimate knowledge of plants and the environment around them, and that began with learning how to identify each plant and what it could be used for. Plants not only provide food, they also give us medicine, materials for shelter, for fuel, to make tools, fibres for cloth and cordage. Some plants even give us soap. The uses are almost endless, and I find this absolutely fascinating. The more I know about plants, the more I want to learn. And I think the more we understand the importance of the natural world around us, the more inclined we are to protect it. And that for me is really important. In addition to all of this, it's free food. Who wouldn't want free food? But before you start heading out into the hills, there are some areas of caution that you do need to take into account. Knowing when not to forage is a really important topic to cover before we get too carried away. First and foremost, if you are not 100% certain of what you are picking, do not eat it, otherwise known as how not to die. I can't emphasise this enough. There are some species of plants and mushrooms in the UK which will kill you if you eat them. There are many more that will make you rather ill. That might be give you a gastric upset, or some can even give kidney failure. Others can burn or irritate your skin. So learning to confidently identify the species is really important first step to foraging. If you're looking at the plant and going, well, I think it might be a dandelion, you don't pick it. You have to be 100% certain that you know that is a dandelion or a nettle or whatever else. We're going to look at a few things in a moment. And unfortunately, there are no hard and fast rules. You can't say, for instance, all red berries are okay and blackberries aren't. It's not as simple as that. The only way to forage safely is to know 100% without doubt what you are picking. And we'll go through that in a bit more detail very soon. Another thing that I get asked quite a lot is, where can you forage? You can't just pick from any land at all. For instance, you can't forage on private land unless you've got the landowner's permission. It is illegal and you will get done for trespassing if you're caught. Also, nature reserves and sites of special scientific interest, they're completely out of bounds. That's also illegal alongside picking or uprooting any endangered plants. But if you're only picking plants that you can identify safely, then the chances are you're not likely to go wrong. Also, you can't forage on common and public land if it's for commercial gain. That means that everything that you pick has to be for your own personal consumption. No selling, no picking for restaurants, no picking for baking cakes that you're going to sell onwards. It's only purely for your own use. Largely the reason this has come about is that I think around about the 1980s, foraging became really trendy and fashionable, and a lot of high-end restaurants were using and paying a lot of money for the wild foods. So there was kind of like an influx of people going out there foraging to sell on to the restaurants and make some profit, which resulted in a lot of species becoming endangered because they were being overpicked and over-harvested. So a lot of boroughs, particularly around the London area, added into bylaws that you weren't allowed to pick at all. For the most part, in the majority of the country, you're safe as long as you are just picking for yourself. I recommend avoiding heavy traffic routes, particularly where a lot of people are walking their dogs. I mean, yeah, okay, you're going to wash stuff when you get it home, but say no more. Also, along roadsides, quite often berries in particular look really tempting when on the roadside. They always seem to be bigger and juicier on the edges of the roads than anywhere else. Unfortunately, that's because of the heavy metals from the pollution. It makes them look really appealing and enhances the growth, but those heavy metals aren't so great for us, so try to avoid that if you can. And another thing that you might want to think about, if you're picking the agricultural land, consider if it's likely the pesticides are being used in the area. That is down to a personal choice though. The final rule, if you like, for foraging is never take more than 50% of the available crop. Some people say no more than 20%, a little bit of disagreement there, but the main thing to bear in mind is that you're leaving enough behind to grow and reseed and spread so that the plant doesn't die out. If there are just a few plants, then I'd say leave them alone, leave them to flourish. Hopefully, if you can come back later in the season or the following year, there'll be a bigger crop than to pick from. And also, never take more than you need. Most wild foods don't have a very long shelf life, so it's quite wasteful if you're not going to use them straight away. The key thing to me about living in harmony with nature is remembering that there are other birds, insects, animals that are all sharing these foods. Nature will always provide enough to share, so long as we're not greedy with it. So with these basic guidelines in hand, let's take a look at some key plants that can be found in abundance at this time of year. So the first plant that I'm going to talk about, I think will be familiar to pretty much everyone here, and that is the stinging nettle. Now, we learn what this is as children, because who hasn't been stung by a nettle at some point in their life? I'm sure there will be some, but not many. So we very quickly learn that this plant is going to hurt us. So we learn to recognise what it is so that we can avoid it. But as foragers, it's like gold dust. It is probably one of my favourite plants, so much so that I leave a section of my garden just to grow wild and let the nettles grow. But at the moment, this time of year, they're very small. They're only just starting to come through. Zoom in a little bit. So they're just starting to appear. The new growth coming through. And for the benefit of anybody who can't recognise a nettle, what you're looking for really when in identifying this plant is that the leaves are in alternate pairs. So you see there's always going to be sort of two that way and then two this way, and obviously as the plant grows that becomes more distinct. The leaves are always larger at the bottom, getting gradually smaller towards the top, and most distinctly at all, if I just turn this around slightly, I don't know whether you can see this, they are, because it's small, it's kind of hard to notice, but they're covered completely in tiny little hairs. It's the hairs that cause the sting. Obviously when they're this small I can touch them a bit easier, but the leaves, the stems, every part of the plant is covered in these vicious little hairs, which causes so much damage. So that's how to spot a nettle. And they're quite easy to find as well. They tend to grow quite abundantly on any kind of waste ground, hedgerows, anywhere they can. They're quite invasive, so you quite often will get a lot of them. And springtime is the best time for picking nettle leaves. When we're picking nettles, we really only want the new growth. So in little plants like this, we can pick the whole thing. When they get a bit taller, we want to be looking to just pick the very tips. So the top maybe is 3 or 4 at the most pairs of leaves, and then leave the plant lower down. Further down, it becomes too bitter and too tough. We want the tender, fresh leaves. In terms of how to use it, nettles have so many different uses. From a food point of view, they can be used pretty much just like spinach. They have quite a distinct flavour, which is sort of unique to nettles. Really, it's hard to describe. It's quite a strong flavour, and it's perhaps an acquired taste, but it's one that I really enjoy. So I'd say just give it a try and see. But in terms of cooking, yes, you can put them in soups and stews. There is one of my favourite recipes that I make is a wild garlic and nettle risotto, which is really good. You can put them in soups. You can cream them and use them as a side dish. Food-wise, they're quite versatile, and they're also really nutritionally high. They are like the superfood of the foraging world. They're incredibly high in iron. I think it's something like double the amount of iron than what you would get in spinach. So they're really high in iron, but also really rich in vitamin C, vitamin A, and loads of minerals: magnesium, calcium, potassium, lots more. And as I mentioned earlier, wild foods are naturally densely packed with nutrients. You get the nettles really do pack a punch in terms of the nutrition that they give you. The other thing that I use nettles for quite a lot is making a tea. I find that really refreshing, and I really enjoy a nettle tea, particularly like in springtime when you're starting to garden in the summer, and when I'm clearing areas of the garden, and I might be sort of clearing some of the brush or the rubbish, and as I'm digging it up, any nettles that I want to remove, I make sure I save the tops and make some tea out of them. In fact, to make the tea, literally all you need to do is boil them up. Cooking or nettles removes the sting, and anything that crushes the hairs basically stops them from stinging you. So as soon as they're cooked, they're safe to handle. So what I tend to do is boil them up, drink the liquid, and then save the vegetable to then use in cooking. If you mix the liquid with say a slice of lemon and a little bit of honey, that makes a really nice refreshing drink. You can also make it into a cordial or beer or wine. Like I say, so many things that you can use nettles for. From a medicinal point of view, nettle tea is really good antihistamine. It's good for hay fever in particular, especially if it's mixed with elderflowers in springtime. I don't suffer from hay fever myself, so I'm afraid I can't comment on just how effective it is, but my son does get hay fever, and if nothing else it stops him complaining, so in my book that's quite a good thing. It's also good for arthritic joints. It removes toxins and acids from the joints. If you're brave enough, rubbing the sting into sore joints is supposed to be quite good, but I don't think I recommend it personally. The Romans used to use that, or use the sting, to stimulate circulation, to get the blood flowing in it's cold British weather. But again, I don't fancy that myself. Because of the high iron content, nettles are really good for anemia or any kind of bleeding conditions. But the real gem in nettles for me is the seeds. The nettle seeds, which come out in usually towards the end of summer, maybe it's August time they start appearing, and you can collect them right the way through to middle of October usually. And the seeds are known as adaptogens, which kind of means they help our bodies deal with or adapt to internal and external stresses, whether that be sort of stress in terms of anxiety, sort of stress, emotional stress, or physical stress that the body might be under that we're not aware of. They regulate the hormones and they restore the adrenal glands. They're really good as a pick-me-up if you're feeling a bit run down and drained. Adding a spoonful of nettle seeds into your breakfast on a morning can be really helpful. And they're good for any condition that relates to hormone imbalances. So yeah, collect them, dry them in autumn, add a spoonful to your meals once a day, and there really is no harm to doing that, and it could do you a world of good. So the next plant I'm going to talk about is wild garlic, also known as ramsons, and it tends to grow on riverbanks. It's just starting to sprout through here, this area now. Usually starts emerging middle of February, so by now we're starting to see some quite good leaf growth, which will, by another month's time, this whole area will literally just be a carpet of leaves. So how to identify wild garlic? When it's just the leaves, you have this kind of really elongated leaf shape on a really long stem going right towards the tip. There's very little veins on the leaf, apart from just some lines running straight down. That's kind of a key thing to look out for on the leaves. And the most obvious way of identifying this herb is through smell. Even just putting the leaf to your face, it's got a really strong smell of garlic, and the taste is really strong and pungent and bittery. I absolutely love it. This is probably my favourite thing to collect at this time of year. So one of the things to avoid or be careful of when you are collecting wild garlic is that sometimes there's a plant called lords and ladies, also known as cuckoo plant, which can grow in and amongst the leaves. A lot of foragers do point this out as an area of caution, because the lords and ladies leaves quite often in some parts of the country grow in amongst the wild garlic. So if you've got a huge carpeted area of leaves and you're just snatching leaves up, there's a chance that you could pick the wrong leaves up at the same time. The lords and ladies are highly toxic. They cause burns to your skin and also your insides if you weaken. Yeah, not great. So we do want to avoid picking those by accident. The leaves are quite different. If you have them side by side, it's quite easy to tell one from the other. But obviously, if you're just snatching up handfuls of leaves, then there's a chance that you could get the toxic ones mixed in. So just an area of caution there. Once we reach about May time, you usually find that wild garlic's starting to flower, and these carpets of leaves turn into a mass of white flowers. And at this point, it's a lot easier to identify. The flowers are very distinctive. The smell is really strong, and it's quite clear that you've got wild garlic. Again, just take a little bit of caution when you're picking the individual leaves. So when it comes to using wild garlic, the leaves and the flowers can both be eaten raw in salads. You can chop them up and add them into cooking like you would a herb. Anything that you would normally use bulb garlic for can be replaced with the leaves of garlic. It's really good in an omelette or with cheese on toast. You can make it into a pesto in order to preserve it, or perhaps you can make it into a tincture for medical use. Wild garlic is a powerful antibiotic. It's also antiviral and antifungal, so it's great for a chesty cough or colds. You can make quite a good cough medicine by mixing the garlic with honey. You can use it topically on your skin if you've got some kind of fungal infection. It's also good for reducing blood pressure. It's been known to thin the blood, reducing clotting. However, if you're wanting to use any herb for medicinal purposes, I do recommend you consult a qualified herbalist. Some people are allergic to garlic, so please just keep that in mind. And also, it is quite pungent on the breath. Dandelions are another plant that I was wanting to talk about today. Now, these are a common childhood favourite and found in many gardens. Unfortunately, many people tend to just pull them up as weeds, but these plants are actually really important to wildlife, in particular bees. Dandelions flower early in the spring, and they provide food for bees and butterflies when there's not much else around. So if you do have them in your garden, please don't use weed killer on them, as this kills the bees too. If you must remove them, it's better to dig them up. But of course, I just leave them to grow because I think they're quite pretty and they have lots of useful purposes. If you're not familiar with a dandelion, they're mostly recognised by the flowers, which are these bright yellow feathery heads on a single stem. There are a number of plants that have flowers similar to a dandelion, in the sense that they have these same bright yellow heads, but if you look at the plant as a whole, they are quite easy to identify. So if we take a look at the leaves, they're quite long and pointed with this zigzaggy serrated edge, and all the leaves grow from a central rosette at the base of the plant. The stems are hollow with a single flower head on each stem, and if you snap the stem in half, it has like a white sticky sap inside. This sap actually is really good for treating warts and verrucas. Then of course there's the seed head, or the dandelion clock, which appears as the petals start to die away. I still enjoy blowing dandelion seeds and watching them float away on the breeze. All of the plant is edible, including the root, which can be used as a substitute for coffee, though I haven't tried that myself. The leaves are a little bitter, they're not to everyone's taste, but if you add just a small quantity into a salad, they can add a bit of flavour and nutrition. They are high in potassium and they have strong diuretic properties, so they're good for water retention or high blood pressure. They're a great detox for the liver, kidneys and the digestive tract, helping to flush away excess water, any waste and also harmful toxins. They're also a mild laxative, so you don't want to eat too much at once. If you don't like the taste of the leaves, you can also get some of the health benefits by using the flowers, though these aren't as powerful. The flowers can be used to flavour vinegar, they can be infused in oil, or they can be used to make wine and cordials. But my favourite discovery by far is that you can make dandelion honey. Of course, it's not real honey, it's more of a thick syrup, but it's a great vegan alternative to the real thing. I made this for the first time last year and was truly amazed. It smells delicious, it actually tastes of honey. You've really got to try it to believe me. So if you'd like the recipe, let me know afterwards and hopefully I'll be able to send out a link. Now this is another garden weed that's not really a weed to me, and it's called hairy bittercress. It's very common. It quite often grows in cracks in the pavement, or if you have an allotment or any bits of bare soil, it will quite quickly spread across them like it has done here in my garden. But it tastes just like cress. It's got it's only very small leaves and very small plant, and it's got really powerful peppery flavour. If you have a look here, so can't quite that in focus, but the little leaves, if you can see that, taste absolutely fabulous. Got a peppery cress kind of taste to them, and you can't really tell in that mass there, but they tend to grow in little rosettes like this, so everything comes from this central point, and then a little bit later in spring, out the centre, we'll shoot some very tiny clusters of white flowers on long stems. So this is pretty much a wild version of cress. That's about all I would use it for, is tossing it in salads, and it adds a really nice pungent flavour. Like I say, it tends to be too small to use for much else, but it really does add a lot of taste to salad, or you can chuck it into any kind of soups or sauces that you might be making. You use it as a herb basically. So that's hairy bittercress. Now this is another leaf that's emerging at the moment, and this is hedge garlic, also known as garlic mustard, or some people call it Jack in the Hedge. Now, it's a funny one this, because although it's called hedge garlic, to me it doesn't really taste very much of garlic. It's got more of a strong cabbagey flavour, a bit like a Savoy cabbage almost. But if you were to pick a leaf and then crush it and sort of rub it up like this, the smell that you get then from the leaf is really strong of garlic, and that is where it gets its name, and obviously helps with identifying it also. In terms of using this plant, I prefer just to eat it raw. Chuck it into salads or chop it up as a herb. It's quite a fragile leaf, so personally I don't think it lends itself to cooking very well. It tends to break up, but raw is quite tasty. And you can also mix it in with, say, nettles and wild garlic if you were making a risotto or a pesto or something like that. So this is another great find for spring. It's the flowering blackcurrant, or flowering currants, which is a very close wild sister of cultivated blackcurrants. And these are the first pink flowers to appear in March, April, bringing a lovely splash of colour. I was very excited to find these this morning. They tend to grow in parks and hedgerows or on waste grounds where they've often escaped from gardens, and they're quite easy to identify by these beautiful dangling bunches of pink flowers, usually about 5 to 30 heads in one little cluster. But the main thing as well here is the smell. They smell absolutely delicious. They really do smell of blackcurrant. If in doubt, just put your nose to the bunch of flowers and it's quite obvious what they are. The fruits tend to come later in the summer, but berries on these wild versions are quite small and quite disappointing really. I've often looked out for them just to find that they weren't really worth collecting once they come. They're so tiny, but the flowers and leaves are all edible and have a number of uses. So the leaves can be added to, well, the leaves and flowers can be added to salads and just eaten raw, or just munched on your walk, as I tend to do. They can also be made into a tea. I make a nice herbal tea from them, or you can make them into a syrup or a cordial. You can infuse them in vinegar, white wine vinegar or apple cider vinegar usually, to make a flavoured vinegar. They can also be made into wine, or you can infuse them in vodka for a rather nice blackcurrant flavoured liqueur. Well, that's about all we have time for today. I do hope you found this interesting. It's been very much a beginner's introduction to foraging, and it is a little early still in the year to be able to have collected much live footage, but I hope this gives you a little bit of a starting point if you're interested in wild foods. If you would like to learn more about foraging, there are many excellent resources online, though I would always recommend cross-referencing several different websites or books just to be 100% sure that you know what you're picking. As I said at the beginning, the foundation of safe foraging is confident species identification, understanding where and how plants grow, and a respect for all wildlife. If you would like to learn more about nature in general, whilst at the same time developing a greater understanding and connection to nature, then next month I'm launching my new Wellbeing in Nature walks. These will be initially on a one-to-one basis, but then I'm hoping to do some group sessions later in the summer. As a mindfulness practitioner, my intention with these walks is to help people reconnect with their wild spaces and to demonstrate the many opportunities for mindful awareness that nature provides. A walk in the woods can be so much more than just a walk, and I can show you many ways to further your connection with the earth and your environment. For further details about this and all other aspects of the work we do at Positive Earth, please visit our website at www.positiveearthcommunity.com or find our social channels at Positive Earth UK.